Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Warrant Committee. Karen, could you go through the attendance?
Sure. We have Tom Caldwell, Lori Connolly, Liz Dillon, Jay Fundling, Andrew Coe, Macy Lee, Peter Mon, Julia Maxwell is on Zoom. We have Brian McGuire here. And on Zoom, we have Ron Sia and Judy Steele. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Karen. Good evening, everybody. Good to see all the faces here tonight. So we have our meeting. We're here to discuss, I guess, the budget and the fiscal year budget moving forward and the override. So there's some information I just want to provide to the group. So, and this is similar to what Nick was saying, and some other information I've received, but the select board is meeting tomorrow night. We're trusting that at tomorrow night's meeting, they set a number for the override. So we know exactly what the select board believes that we need. What that number will be, we do not know. You know, when Nick was here last week and we saw from our budget spreadsheets that the override ask at this point is 9.45 million. What happens tomorrow at the select board, we don't know. It could be a much higher number, could be a lower number, it could be that exact number. Now, the 9.5, and anyone please correct me, that is essentially level services plus for the schools. Modified.
So
Lori.
level service, in the real sense of the word that the town has talked about it previously, is the same level of service that we have today, we'll have tomorrow. Service. What they do, and then that service, that level service expense generates a number. That number is 6.4 million, I believe it is, 9.44% increase. They want to use the number, the level service number, 6.4 million, but they have removed a program or two and substituted that with an ELA curriculum that they're 3 years behind in getting purchased and getting implemented in the district. So that was on their needs-based, but because they really need it, and they really think it's important for the kids, and it's not, I'm not sure the great terminology, but it's, our current curriculum is not endorsed by DESE, so we really do need to swap out the curriculum. So they've done a swap in terms of the money. So they actually have something from their needs-based budget in their level service budget, but again, it is the same level service calculated amount, dollars and percent.
Does that make sense?
Not entirely. Does that mean there were some things that they previously said were level service that now they're taking out?
Yes,
So
Program.
we're getting lower service?
it's a program that has, yes, in essence, but I feel like it was a program that they have individuals that will help support it. And I was unclear and I haven't had the question. I didn't have a chance to ask the question today about it
Okay.
because I wasn't sure what it was, but I can get an answer on that.
So there was a school subcommittee meeting this morning with our committee and the school committee. And I'd suggest for those who didn't watch the most recent select school committee meeting, I suggest that you take some time and watch it. It's a longer meeting, but they really they really discuss the budget and what they're looking for, and they do explain the ELA program. Mark Loring gives a presentation towards the end where they describe these things and what they're looking for. The sense I got from the schools was they were going to be looking for a significant number, maybe beyond this 9.5, perhaps more, but we don't know this yet. So I think tomorrow is really going to give us an idea of where we're working and what we recommend. Now, in terms of the select board, I know I had mentioned, and we had brought it up past couple of meetings, that I've been asked for no direction. I haven't been asked to provide any information to them. I've reached out and just haven't heard, which is fine. I get that. So I think really as a committee, you know, I'm kind of looking at the situation. I feel a little powerless here because, you know, we're waiting to set that number. We're waiting to get the warrant. And in addition to that, and I'm not sure if I said this in the last day, we don't really know what's going to be on the annual this year. I think there's some conversation about moving some articles that would be on for the annual to a June meeting. And the potential for the June meeting is to address the MBTA communities. So if MBTA communities is going forward, we needed a June meeting to address that issue. But I think there's been conversation with Nick and the select board that they may take some articles off the annual and move it to that June meeting. So it would be the MBTA, maybe a planning zone article, maybe the overlay district, and some other ones that they can move to try to take some work off our hands so we can really focus on the budget and the school work that we need to do for town meeting. So again, nothing's definite. I haven't been given any specific information on what's going to be on what articles we're going to need to consider for town meeting in May or June. I just don't know that yet. I think by tomorrow we should have some clarity. In terms of the override, I have heard banter, and this isn't from any specific town official or anything like that, but there's some discussion. Is the override vote going to be in April, or is it going to be after April? Again, I don't know. So I'm kind of appearing in front of you today, this evening, with just a lot of questions, things that I've been going through my head and trying to figure out, you know, or even telegraph what we might be seeing. And I just don't know yet. And I just want to just kind of get everybody together and just tell us we're really in a holding pattern. But in addition, so thinking about this, I know there was some discussion last week about if we're going to have everybody in. I've made the decision to at least bring in this police, fire, and DPW. Those are the three major ones. And obviously schools is coming in. So I trust schools is going to be coming in on the 18th. And on the 20th, I'll have police and fire. Both chiefs confirmed with me today. I just wanted to tell you all before I penciled them in. So they'll be the 20th.
The 18th for school.
And the 18th for school. I know you've seen like a lot of flurry of meeting activity. I'm going to try to get a couple more departments in here to speak to us. But again, when you look at the budget, which I know you have, some of the increases are so minuscule to the general government that, I mean, it would be good to talk to them and see. I know that there's a modest increase in the library. It might be good to have them come in and chat with them. But I'm planning to set some people up to come in and just talk with us. I don't think, now my looking at the numbers, that a lot of them don't really see that controversial. They of course do add to the override, but nothing that I saw that jumped out to me anyway. General government and others might have some ideas. So I guess committee, as we're kind of sitting here with our hands folded, twiddling our thumbs, really take a look at that budget sheet and point out some things that maybe stand out to you that maybe you have questions about, because Nick and Amy will come back and we will have the opportunity to go through that the workbook with them and discuss why certain numbers are where they're at, why aren't other things another way, and get that through. So that's really just kind of my breakdown of just new information I wanted to give you. Does anybody have any questions? Judy.
Thank you. If I could ask a question to Lori?
Sure, go ahead, Judy, if Lori's okay with it.
Lori, thank you for all that information. I was wondering if you could clarify for me, the 6.4 million figure is just for the school, or is it townwide?
No, it's 6.4 is the school. I think 1.5 is the town departments. And if you recall, recall, Nick discussed last week, that there's the school department, there are the town departments, and then there are this town department, the town shared services. So health insurance, retirement benefits, OPEB, Jay might have another on the shared services. Is there
I'm sorry, I
another one?
wasn't paying.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the shared services is health insurance, retirement, OPEB. Anything else that's shared?
I'm sorry, I'm not getting the context. Are you saying?
So
like, if-
of the override, Judy was asking, the 6.4, and I said that's the increase in the school department.
Yeah,
I believe
yeah.
the town department's increase is 1.5 million, but town departments are the operating departments, police, fire, library, board of health, general government. And then there's shared services. So a big increase we're seeing in health insurance this year is, and that, I think, in health insurance was the biggest. And then there's retirement and OPEB, and I feel like there was something else, but I,
OPEB.
Maybe go to the budget detail.
pardon?
What's
Sorry,
OPEB?
OPEB is retiree medical.
Oh, okay,
Retirement
okay,
medical
so, okay,
contribution.
so the pension, okay.
Yeah, I'm looking at the thing that we got, the most recent budget from Amy, which Tom shared with us. I'm looking at the tab called expenditure summary. And that's not the 9.5 override, that's the, if we do the 9.5 override, that's the 11.8 that we're spending more than last year. So just to set the context, yeah, 6.3 of that is schools, 3.3 of that is employee benefits, which is pretty much health insurance. 1.2 is public safety, and then they get smaller from there.
Well, but, hold on.
And for those on the computer, this is on the spreadsheet from Amy, and this is under the budget detail sheet.
Where did my file go?
It's the 6th tab in from the budget. This breaks it down. Capital, non-bonded, audit, wage set aside, employee, unemployment, et cetera, public safety, general government.
So, how do I get this page?
And then Lori, I have a follow-up question.
Well, I'm not sure I've answered it completely. It's 6.4 is the schools, 1.5 is town. Blue Hills Regional is up 61,000, and the shared services is 4 million of an increase. That gets us to the 9.5.
Was there any indication, or if any member knows, Tom, anyone, let's just call it 9.5. Is there a sense of how many years this would get us through?
26.
26,
This
not
is
26
just-
years.
FY 26.
Fiscal year 26.
So, we need
9.5 million in
for
FY,
just 1 year?
in FY 20, for FY 26 to balance the budget in FY 26.
Okay, so it leads me to another question, I guess. What happens in 27?
Good question. So Nick was proposing that we would take some free cash that we have this year, instead of throwing it at the current problem, that we would create, and I don't know if he would create a separate fund, but an override fund, if you will, that we could tap into in a future year if we were short. And whether, instead of using it all this year and kicking the can down the road, I don't think we could kick the whole can down the road, but there would be some more reserve fund money available
So-
in that 3 million.
So, listening to this clarification. It seems to me that this is gonna be a continuous problem, maybe?
Maybe.
Maybe, okay. Seems like a lot of, money that we can't spread out. If I were to put it in your own household terms, like you have a vacation fund and, you put money every week into it, and so then it becomes, is that gonna serve the needs of your family vacations? So if you blow that whole fund in 1 year, what's gonna happen next year? No vacations? I know that's very simplistic, but it would seem to me that 9.5 should get us through. Normally when overrides happen, they think ahead. This will get us most likely through 5 years before we have to come to the taxpayers again to keep us afloat. And we all, I believe, want to see the town on good footing. We want services in our town. We're used to them, and it seems we're willing to pay for them. It's just, that was my question, the longevity. Thank you, Lori and everyone.
Julia?
Julia?
So, based on the school committee's subcommittee meeting this morning, something I learned, and other people who were on that call with me, feel free to correct me if I'm not getting this right, is that they're part of the school's budgeting for FY26 takes into account a lot of the structural deficiencies in past years' budgeting that resulted in, the schools continuing to end up in a deficit and needing these large percent increases year over year. So in theory, with all the work that has been done, by Katie and others, this budget, the level service budget, should, not encounter the same problems that past year's budgets, school budgets have encountered. So I was pleased to hear that, but, I think we may, as a larger warrant committee, want to delve into some more details on that with the school committee when they come in to talk to us. So my understanding from that meeting, and then I was watching the warrant committee meeting from last week that I missed where Nick presented, was that, as Lori said, based on us trying to implement some of these best practices that I think we have not always been doing as a town, my understanding is a level service budget would probably get us level service for, I think Nick said like 3-ish years, but that's just level service. There's nothing extra in there. So my concern about the level service budget is people, voters who maybe aren't paying super close attention or don't really understand how it all works are going to feel duped when, all they're getting is the same thing they're getting now, but they're paying whatever it may be, $1,000 more a year in taxes, and they're told, no, you can't have anything extra. We would have to pass another override. So I'm a little worried about that messaging. We're going to spend a lot of social and political capital on this override, and I'm just very fearful of people that will, the next year be like, well, what am I even paying $1,000 extra a year for? Versus a needs-based budget that, yes, taxpayers would pay more, obviously, but the incremental increase from the level service versus the needs-based and being able to have like extra things to show for that, I think we can't underestimate the potential value in that and the messaging around it, both now and then, you know, after the fact, when we're budgeting again next year.
Thank you, Julia. Ron, then Liz.
Thanks. I just, for Judy's question, my understanding is the override is a permanent change to our taxes. So I don't think we would have to come back to ask for the same amount again, because going forward, every year, the community would pay this additional incremental amount in our real estate taxes. So it sounded like Judy was thinking it's a one-time thing, and then what do we do next year? Right? So,
Yeah,
Well, I don't want to go out of turn, but to answer that, I think the issue is that typically when a town does an override, it will not need another it should be 15 million probably.
it should cover a certain amount of time
X
for
number of
runway.
years,
Let's call it
that's
runway,
right.
That you can keep increasing.
yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, so Ron, like, we've seen this in some other communities recently that have passed overrides. I think Hingham is one of them, that they've passed overrides. Now, they're sitting around this table and they're like $1 million short. So this is happening in other communities too. The need, the balanced budget versus the need-based. And that those slight upticks in spending that don't seem like a lot, end up being $1 million.
Yeah.
So,
I guess it would seem to me it's a philosophical question, how the town thinks it should run itself. If we should go back to the voters each time we feel that there's a need for more funding, or should we ask for more, and I guess it's up to the select board, and we get to agree or not, but the select board can decide, do they ask for more this time, so it gives them 5 years worth, or 7 years worth of room? Or do they say, let's take the amount that we need now, and if we need more in 2 years, we come back and ask for another override and leave it to the voters, right? So I think either way, it's just a decision that management should make, and the select board manages this town, I guess, so.
Ron, I appreciate it. Liz?
One, I don't have much of a voice, so I'm sorry. Two, I agree with Ron. The thing that I would like to hear from the select board, so to your point, Ron, is has the select board or anybody really kind of modeled out? So we know that this 9.5 or whatever number of millions of dollars they come up with is going to cover what we know now that we have to pay for local services. But my understanding is that every year things get more expensive, and then we have additional requirements, like, I know that the special education budget increases because there are new laws that are required and other things that are required of us. So I'm interested, have we I understand the inflation piece, that inflation is higher than the 2.5% that they're allowed to just automatically increase our property taxes, which is why we need to have an override periodically. But I'm curious, have they looked at, okay, what are the other increases that we need in order to have level services, not even to give us anything extra and above, that actually wind up costing more than that flat? Because I'm telling you, it's gonna cost more than that just to even have the level services next year or the year after. So I would prefer personally, again, I'm not in charge, so I leave it up to the select board, but I think it would be helpful to see some kind of modeling or some kind of number about what have we seen those increases be, because from like the finance committee budgetary standpoint, I don't wanna put the town in a bad position where, right, the voters say, well, I voted to have my property taxes increased $1,000 a month, but I'm actually getting less. Not even what I was paying for, but less than what I was getting before because things ramped up in terms of cost. So not even for providing extra services, but just things costing more, things constantly cost more, our contracts costing more, but really just, special education, I don't mean to blame that, but that's the first thing I can think of, where the laws are constantly shifting and we're spending money, and we should probably be spending money, we have to anyway, but I'm just curious about that, like, are they taking that into account, or are they just looking at what today is? Are they looking like 2-3 years in the future?
Absolutely.
So I'd just like to hear from them about that. I don't know the answer, but.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Macy.
I think it's also great that we're having departments such as police and fire and DBW come in, because I think it'll be a great opportunity for us to ask them about projected retirement. I know when I met with the fire department quite a while ago, the chief was amazing in putting together the projected retirements and, and people who are going out, and police did the same too. So I think that's a question that we could ask and see whether this possible override will cover the next 3 years, as opposed to going back to the taxpayers and requesting another override. It's just one of the questions I think we could ask them.
No, I think it'd be good. That's the big question, what number are we gonna, the select board sets the number, right? So we're beholden to them in terms of what they want to do. And does anybody have any other comments just about, Brian?
Well, we should know the chunk of the cost is labor. And we should know what the costs are next year, because it's gonna be a labor contract, I presume. So you should be able to figure it. I don't know when it's gonna be
Like,
decided.
for example, the teachers' union is being negotiated today,
Right,
so we won't know that
but at some,
before town meeting.
you won't know before town meeting.
No, that's, and that's happened frequently when they've done police, fire, all of them. That usually is,
Is it a 3 to 4 year agreement?
it is, yeah.
Wh-
So Nick will do, a wage set aside, if you will, and
Right.
determine a number to
I
hopefully
mean, I would
cover
think
it.
everybody would try to budget like 2.5% for future increases, but who knows, right?
Well, yes, because the property taxes only go up
Right.
2.5%.
I mean, I would think there's some consideration, like everybody realizes that is the key number.
But the
you would think.
teachers.
The teachers should.
The teachers have an automatic, there's steps and lanes in their contracts, so based upon your
Right.
education and years of service, I don't know, I'm not sure exactly what it is, the pieces. But they automatically go up, so they get their increase, and then they have these other bumps too.
Yeah, Ron.
Would it be our responsibility to try to translate what these amounts mean to the average taxpayer? So if it's 9 million or 11 million, who's gonna tell the average taxpayer what that means in terms of their bill every quarter? Us, right?
Yeah, we're gonna tell them, like, this is what you're getting.
So for every $50,000 of real estate value, you should expect,
Yeah, and
you're paying like $3 or something like that?
I think Nick put something on the website already
Yeah.
for that.
We're gonna, we'll explain the breakdowns, like, these are the percentages, this is what we expect, per governmental department. I mean, if you look at them, it's not really mind-blowing numbers. I think really the expectations is on the school side. What are we gonna see within the schools? Not only making up the deficit, 6 million plus, but then in addition to that, and are we safe? And like Lori or any other member of the school subcommittee, like the sped costs, I don't know if it's always going up, out of district, always going up, numbers increasing. Are there gonna be big changes?
I don't know, it was in 23. So the issue that happened in 24 with the huge increase, they communicated, DESI communicated that special ed out of district increase in October, and it should have been in the budget, and it was 14%. Was a huge increase, it was a huge outlier, it was in all the press at the time, because all the towns were like, holy cow, how are we gonna cover this cost? And we did not budget for it.
In which year?
In our 24 budget,
Okay,
it was not budgeted. That increase was not budgeted.
because we learned about it in time that it could have been in the budget, you're saying?
Absolutely did.
Well, we did learn about it.
Well-
We were told, and that was moving the money forward, correct? That was not done.
It was not put in the budget. They get emails, and now I get the DESI emails that go out that tell you everything that's happening, so clearly everybody's getting the information. It did not get in the budget, that big increase. there was an increase the following year in the budget, but it actually got affected in '24.
And that was the use of the reserve funds
And that's when, yeah,
cover.
so that is what a lot of the $4 million problem was in '24.
Jay, can you share the budget detail sheet?
Yeah, let me share my screen.
So this is a great sheet, I think. I was speaking to you about it at the beginning of the meeting, but it lays out sped, and it lays out these costs and the increase.
Whoops, I'm having a hard time.
Tom, I'm just going to interrupt for a second and talk to Allison. If you would like to be promoted, can you accept the request to be a panelist? I'll send it again.
So you want the tab that's called budget detail?
Yeah, the budget
Okay.
detail.
Was this in the folder that you had emailed?
This is in the folder, and if any of you are having difficulty, email Rob Mallet and just tell them what's going on, that Amy and Nick are setting up a folder for us. There's information in there, and you just need to access it. But you go down and you can see, this sheet lays it out.
It's sort of a long sheet. What would you like me to?
Well, you can focus on the schools.
Which worksheet is that?
It's called 1 period FY 2026 budget worksheet draft 21025. So, okay, I'm looking at the schools.
Why can't I find schools? Okay, so
So what we see is appropriated last year salaries and wages of 55.6 million, and they're saying this year 59.7 million salaries and wages. That's a difference of, just off the top of my head, about $4 million. And then the school department general from 11.6 to 13.8. That's about 2.2. Add those together, you get, well, I rounded off a little bit in my head, but you get to the 6.3
yep.
increase.
And the ARPA, so there's no sped costs in this breakdown,
Not broken out, no.
but it's significant and is constantly increasing. So that's something we always have to keep an eye on in terms of moving forward over the course of the next several years. Our special ed costs as a district have gone up. Is that, Lori, is that accurate?
Yeah.
In the past?
Yeah, when I talked,
So,
sorry.
Oh, Andrew, yeah.
Yeah, when I talked to Dr. Burrows a couple of months ago, he said one of the big drivers is that the special ed costs are constantly increasing.
Yeah.
And so when I think about budget line item that represents 52% of the town budget and something that is outpacing the 2.5% tax levy, or that 2.5% increase, between that and benefits alone is going to be a constant problem for the town. And so how do we compensate for that? We can't have perpetual overrides. We either need new growth or need to cut fat from somewhere else, and eventually it's going to be bone. We're going to hit bone.
Yeah, it's going to come back.
So I know one of the things I think I recall from the school presentation was that in theory, when and if a new school building is built, that some of those special ed, we would in theory not be sending out, exporting to other towns and reduce those costs. But what I never heard was how big a number that would actually be.
Yeah. My question too on the removing the out of district placements, what would the personnel have to look like within the school?
Because you'd have to hire someone.
And just given, I don't know, but I would assume those are specialized education positions that you need certain training for. Lori?
And we talked about that a little bit this morning. And at one point, Glenn was here a couple of years ago talking about having like a medical classroom. And I was asking about that today, like, could we do that? But the issue is, you have kids that are within, how many grades? 12 grades. So it's not like you're gonna put everybody in one classroom. And the issue is that you just need staff to be able to put them in a classroom, a regular classroom. And then you have somebody assisting them, like another teacher almost, that comes in to work with them. Unless you're able to have a group in the first grade of 12 children that have identical needs, that you would create, you know, a program that's OT, PT, like whatever things that they need, speech, OT, that they would then go through the years in the same group. But I think there's also some negatives to that, you know, being confined to the same kids all the time. And part of the issue is you want them to be able to experience the whole,
It's integration.
the integration with everyone. So that is a little challenging. But what I don't know, which I'm gonna try to get the information on, is of the number of children that we have in special ed, what are the services they're getting? How many are actually going out of district, and what would it take to bring them in?
And we had some previous warrant committee discussions about that, I think, with Glenn. How can we make that happen? And will we save money in the long run? More upfront, but in the long run, we've controlled the cost.
Correct. And I would say I did not see special ed, like, that 14% increase was an outlier, and it was not 14% double digits the next year. So, for what that's worth, it's, you know, it's not 2.5, it might be 3.
And it was approximately, it was like 3.2, right?
It was not.
That's what it was. So it was modest, I guess, right? Like the overall picture. Does anybody have anything more for about schools in general?
And it looks like it's like a $4 million number, $4 million for special ed,
Okay.
the special ed line item, out of the total.
Out of the 6.4?
No, 4 million a year for special ed,
Oh.
out of 60 million. Again, I think the key point is that the salaries are 80% of the budget. So when salaries go up more than 2.5%, you've got a big number that's growing.
And it's not even just the salaries, it's the benefits,
That's exactly right.
salaries and benefits.
Which I think was part of our issue with our health insurance going up, despite the fact that we gave a healthcare holiday last year. The cost, like many people got on, new hires that got on health insurance. And I think they attempted to increase the community schools' availability, so they hired people. So there are a number of factors associated with that, with more people. Higher numbers, more health insurance.
Allison has her hand up.
Allison?
Hi, sorry. Yeah, so I just wanted to add to that too, because per the meeting this morning, you know, when we look at the hiring, you know, you're looking at all these additional positions that were added with the funding from the ARPA, and that is going to increase your budget drastically. So, you know, my question was to get an evaluation process of the non-teaching positions, so that we could evaluate, you know, at a level so that we could, you know, go to the town on an override and make certain certain cuts to the budget so that we show good faith, to the town that we're really, budgeting, because we are at such a high number, and it's not a matter of going through and, redlining positions that, just randomly. It's just having better processes for evaluating positions so that we could get the most for the dollar. And it didn't seem to me there was an assessment or an evaluation process done. Definitely in the past, that was, something we've always asked for with the finance person. Do they do an HR process? Is there an evaluation of job descriptions, goals met, and there didn't seem to be one. So again, I was asking it this year for the same kind of understanding of process, and it didn't seem that there was a breakdown of what positions, were prioritized over others. And when we were making any sort of changes, it was kind of a random, to me, in my opinion, selection of what they wanted to. And I think for an outside view, it was more of a tug on heartstrings than it was of, really sitting down and evaluating. Because obviously we want every teacher, but do we need certain positions that prove to have not data-driven results? So that's just something I think is important when the schools come in the evaluation process of financially, because as we spoke this morning, there is going to be a deficit for 2025, 2026, and they're not sure exactly where they're going to get the money. And from what I'm understanding, it's this free cash from Nick that might be used, and we've done this previously, and this is my concern, that we're gonna continuously be hoping for this free cash. Now, if you've been on the warrant for many years, the first year I was here, we only had $500,000 in free cash. We've seen an increase in free cash, but we've never lived on free cash. And as we are aware, we've always used it for one-time funds. So, we have to be very concerned with this idea of using free cash. This is pretty much why we're in this situation. So there's a lot of things to think about, and I know that's a lot, but that's pretty much, what I received from the meeting today, that there is going to be, a need for that again. Again, the last thing I'm going to say is something that was also brought up at the meeting, which is this possibility of moving the override to June. And, for anybody who is really concerned about the teachers, this move would be detrimental to keeping these positions with the teachers that we have, because the union contracts are out in May, and if we move it to June, we will lose teachers because they will do the right thing for themselves, and that will be to look for new jobs. So for people who are meeting outside of this and going to these, push for this June date, there should be, a concern there as well. So just a lot to process, but all, I think, important points to bring to the committee.
Thank you, Allison. Liz?
Well, when the school, I just want to agree with Allison's point about the June, a lot of Allison's point, but in particular,
Yeah.
I want to agree with Allison's point about the June. So I'd be interested to hear what the select board says about that. But also, I'll be interested when the school committee comes in to see what their thoughts are about that, because, my understanding is that, Allison's 100% correct, as she often is, but, because, the teachers will get those pink slips. They're gonna leave if they're gonna leave, but the longer that they have to wait, the more frustrating it is. And so again, I don't want to put ourselves in a situation as a town where we're finding ourselves kind of in a bad place just from not planning ahead, really, because we've known about this. we've been talking about this override since, let me flip my book, all the way back. to-
July, August?
Yeah, September, well, the first, August 26th.
We talked about it last year.
I remember.
And the year
so
before.
That's August, and, you know, now we're in March of the next year, and so, you know, I don't understand this sort of discussion about, that I've heard from the select board about, you know, we're not really prepared to discuss this because we have been talking about it for a long time. Certainly, we've known about it since August, so, you know, I would just be curious to see what the select board's rationale, if that's more than just kind of a rumor in the wind. And then, like, let's have a number. I'm very concerned, you know, I raised this the last time, I'm very concerned about the timing because we have, I mean to be rude to everybody, but we have this meeting tomorrow where they're supposed to be voting on the number, and then we have to get the warrant in by the end of the month, and then when are we discussing all of this?
Is,
and how
is
are
my
we-
anxiety radiating
No, I'm
at you right
anxious
now? Because,
myself.
yeah,
No, I am independently anxious, and so I don't really understand that because, again, like going all the way back, we've known about this since before August. So, you know, I really like to kind of echo Allison's good point that I think that we need to just move it along a little bit here and let the people vote and have the override if people want to, and if they don't want to have the override, then the people can speak to that when they cast their ballot. But, you know, I would be curious to see what the select board's rationale about that is, honestly, because I don't really understand that. But maybe they're not trying to move it to June, I don't know, but I've heard whisperings of that as well, so.
yeah, it was, and I appreciate that. I think, like, when I heard this, I was thinking about it. If I think about myself, what I would do if I was a teacher, I'd be looking for another job, like now. I don't know what the schools say. I'm certainly not going to speak to them. I'm certain they have an interest in getting this number settled as soon as possible so they can go on with the business of teaching kids. So that will be interesting. So there's a lot of anticipation for tomorrow's meeting, just in regards to that. Brian?
Just on special ed, I remember doing the tour at Collicott, and they said that they used to go out of district at one point, and then when they redid Collicott and Cunningham, they started special ed there. And there were originally 8 students when the first year. Did they say there were like 29 now?
Yeah, there's a lot.
It's like exponentially increased, which they need 1 teacher every 2 students is my recollection that they said, which is like huge. That's a big cost. I don't know why it's blown up so much, but it seems bizarre. But I had a thought. I don't know if this is seat of the pants, but every school has special ed. Is there a benefit or a cost effectiveness if it was in one location, one school? You know, they might not need certain, I don't know, psychologists or something, you know, or so much infrastructure. It was in one location, within the town.
I
Within the town.
think the issue is they would like to have the kids be part of the community. So if you live in East Milton, you don't want the kids to go to Glover or Tucker. You want them at Cunningham or Collicott. Do you know what I mean? Because
Right.
that's their friends and they'll see them, and it's all about the learning experience for them.
And I get that, and I respect that. But you
But
know,
that's why.
like 20 years ago, they weren't even going to Milton,
Correct.
at all. They weren't even in
No,
town,
that's right.
which is worse.
Yeah.
So I was thinking maybe it's not so bad. Thought.
Yeah, this.
Until we can get that bus situation sorted out. I'm very concerned about the bus situation. I keep bringing that up. And that was one of the things on the chopping block, was that extra bus, so.
Yeah.
But that's a good point that you raised. I'm interested in that too. Where we can kind of.
Yeah, when I went to Milton schools, there was a special ed class at Glover my brother went to, Down syndrome. And then they moved, he was up at the Pierce, and when I was at Pierce with him, but there were only 12 kids in the class at that time, until they turned 22.
Yeah.
And of course, the program ends, but no, certainly a concern. And a good idea, Brian. I mean, I think it makes sense. Can I go back to the positions? if anybody from the school, like, I know, obviously, like, you don't want to see the loss of teachers, certainly. But just to Allison's point and some other points, is there a concern from the subcommittee that positions, non-teaching positions, could be looked at in terms of, and I'm not saying like, but I'm saying like, were there concerns about full-time positions, part-time positions, the roles? Was it just who's doing what? Like, what was the temperature about that?
Allison asked about it at this meeting, the last meeting we had. I brought it up because we had, Allison and I had met with Peter and Glenn previously and went through this. Exactly that. Have you gone through all of the positions? What is everybody doing? It's been 15 years of, we need to do X, Y, Z. Oh, let's hire a position, and they do. And then we need ABC, and we hire a position to do ABC. But, so that's just been accumulating. So we haven't done
Does this make sense?
a reorg that you have in the corporate world.
Yep.
We need a reorg.
Now, those administrative, like non-teaching,
And it could ultimately be everything, but especially those we should look at. I mean, and that was Allison's focus today was, what about the non-teaching positions? Have we looked at all of those?
Ron?
I wonder if the school committee and the principals are doing it without us. I would hope that someone's doing it. I don't know if we need to be there. Okay.
We don't need to be there, but I don't think it's,
Well, the
I mean, I think-
principals, right? The principals, how do they operate their budget in that sense? Laura?
well, it became clear that the budget was never really presented. The budget was handled at the central office. So Katie has been describing, you at this school get a budget of X. You have to live within your budget, and it seemed like a big surprise. So I think it's a different way of operating now, and that will be challenging probably for everyone who has not had to operate within a budget.
So when you say the central office was doing them, Lori, was it just basically like send us the bills and we'll pay them? Versus here's your scoop.
I don't really know. It sounded like Katie is presenting a budget for each of the schools. And that was, and you're being held accountable now for this budget. What does that mean?
Okay, and that's,
In the case of if they wanted to hire someone, there isn't a form. If there's not a rec for a person that you fill out and say, I want to hire this position, and it goes around the table and 10 people sign off on it to make sure that you need the position. It did not sound like any of that was happening. They are putting those processes in place now. But they weren't happening, so.
And that goes back to sort of my comment in the last meeting where I'd love to see more detail, real-time detail. And I don't think the current accounting system that the town uses gives us that ability to drill down in a timely manner. I mean, and going back to something I said earlier that night, I'd be curious to see what other people on the warrant committee, how they look at the budget. But for me, if tax in an inflationary environment, assuming taxes are going up, that's normal, almost expected. The question for me is, what are the quality of the services that we're getting? What's the quantity of the services that we're getting? And what is the commensurate increase in my property value? And if those three are don't balance out, or one is really outpacing the other, then as someone without kids in the school, in the Milton School District anymore, it, over time, that would eventually drive me out of town, because it wouldn't make financial sense to stay in the town. And I would think, even if you have kids in the school, that would be something that you think about. And what am I getting for my taxes? Like, and quality of service to me would mean either better road paving or better teaching, more enrichment programs within the schools, and so on, and so on. And quantity would be, are there more police officers? I had a really interesting conversation with the fire chief, by the way, who I thought was great. And based on his description, it sounds like they're really understaffed in certain areas that are critical from a public safety standpoint.
It's very scary.
So, but again, I always go back to when I look at the budget, what are the biggest items? And how can we study them in more detail to make sure we're saving the most that we can there? And also, to Lori's comment, look at opportunities for consolidation and savings and constant rethink. And for me, coming from an IT background, IT is a classic example where, you traditionally, and people are used to this because they do the same thing over and over again, every 5 years they buy new hardware and they go through this huge capital expense. And in today's environment, you don't have to do that. Stuff everything in the cloud and make everything an OpEx. And you do things like save space, not spend energy, turn off the servers at night when there are no town services that need them, and so on and so on. And I think that type of rethink, based on what you're telling me, is not happening in the schools or broadly across town. So that's the biggest opportunities from my perspective on how we can sort of long-term find a new steady state for what the budget should be.
Yeah, I just adding to what my colleague has said here, I don't understand the level of accountability in the schools for anything. And I'm looking at this for the first time, so you only get these eyes once. In the world I come from, if you were over budget, big time, 2 years in a row, there would be some issues, some changes, certainly I'll look at who's responsible and who's accountable, who's held accountable for those kinds of overages. In this case, we're looking for an override without really knowing if, to your point, what are we getting at? Is there any way we can look at this for more efficiency in the services provided? We don't want to lose teachers, but even from a teaching perspective, are all the teachers expected to be at the same level, or some better, some not? I mean, these are the kinds of things that I don't think that the school is equipped, and we're not doing this as a math exercise. It's qualitative as well as quantitative, much even maybe even more so. But we need to have a better handle on, I think, what we're paying for, and that's from a taxpayer perspective as well. What are we getting for the dollars being spent? And are they being spent efficiently and effectively? And I'm going to assume that there is a level of competency, for sure. Could it be better at the same time we're asking for more money, given that we've had two budgets that have been over? And that seems, if you're over once, why would you be over a second time? I understand the mechanics of it, but at the same time, be embarrassed to come in and present a budget that's not going to be adequate. or if it's going to be over, I'd know it and share it and see what we could do about it before it became what it is.
Macy?
I just want to add on to what Peter said, and as well as Andrew. And my curiosity is whether the school committee not just looked at teachers' positions, but those of administrative staff and paraprofessionals and what's needed there. So I think it's just it's an overall staffing issue, because I know the school has a lot of different types of staff in addition to teachers, and whether that's also overwhelming the budget as well. So, and maybe Lori can answer that since she's immersed in that particular budget.
Yeah, I don't, I think that's a big job to do, and I don't think that since the overage and then the subsequent overage, they've had time to actually do that.
Because I think that's really important, because that's part of the budget, right? It goes
Well,
into
absolutely.
Yeah, so-
Again,
so
we've
who-
asked.
Right,
The optics for that,
right.
asking for an override, it's like, well, we missed our budget 2 years in a row, and so now we need more money.
Right, you should
And
answer
we'll
it,
take care
yeah.
of this, we'll take care of this money better than we took care of the
Right.
last budgets.
So it's teachers, administrative staff, paraprofessionals, athletics, I don't know, it's just, but it's just an overall picture that I think that, I feel that the taxpayers need to understand. So so 4 million is going to sped, which is not a lot compared to 60 million. I mean, that's not, because, I was always under the impression, due to my ignorance, that it was an overwhelming part of the budget, and now that Lori has informed us of that, so where is this other,
Was it rather,
50,
the other
yeah.
70 million or the 74 that they're asking for?
56 million, where's it going to? I
Jay
don't
has
know.
his hand.
Jay?
I wasn't going to talk about the schools. Julia raised her hand, and I think she might be, so I'll defer.
Thanks, Jay. I feel like I hear this a lot about, this global assessment, and I feel like the school's response is that yes, they have and continue to do that. But clearly, there are people who are unsatisfied with that answer. So I asked this question previously in the school finance subcommittee meeting, but I'll ask it here as well. What would be satisfactory for you, those who feel that this has not been assessed properly, to see? Like, what is the tangible product that you would want to see and would be satisfied in seeing to know that that task has been done?
Macy, Andrew?
A breakdown of everything, line by line item. Teachers, admin staff. I don't know if they're able to do that, but just perhaps not individually, but grouped.
And we have that.
For me, it's a little different,
Okay.
which is I'd want to know, and part of this is I'm new to the committee. And I don't know how the schools function. So the question I would ask is, walk me through the budget process. And the biggest answer I'd want to get to is that each school is not looking at a zero-sum game, where they're looking at it collectively. And because when you have a situation where you have a budget and people every year, their budgetary process is, let's tack on 2.5% and what else do we need, without rethinking whether that baseline is correct. And the other behavior that typically happens is that because they feel like they have to fight for the number every year, they have to spend the money, whether or not it's smart, what they're doing is smart or not. And so if they are going through this process collectively, both in a centralized manner and also in collaboration with each school, then I'd feel much better about the process. And I'd also want to know about the line items, like you mentioned, and what's changing and why, and really focus on the biggest numbers. And obviously, it's going to be teachers and like headcount and salary. And then look at any of the other benefits and look at any of the other items. But I would really want to get educated on how they go about doing their budget process and whether or not they are really looking at it, or are they starting from this was last year's number and we need a modest increase and we know we have these needs. Because that would tell me that they're not looking at it critically and looking to figure out whether there are opportunities to save money, or whether or not they need to restructure and go about doing their business in a more efficient manner. I mean, that's all I really care about.
Anyone else? Liz? To Julia's point,
Yeah. So
and then Allison.
the one concern I have about that is that we're just talking about the schools. And the override isn't just for the schools, it's for all the departments. And so I understand that, but I think that we can't forget about the fact that it affects the DPW, it affects the fire department, it affects the police and all the other departments too. And so, I have some concerns about that, especially after that school committee meeting that they had that we all watched. So I think that our idea generally of looking into the underlying assumptions about every year, is it just true that the department comes in and says, okay, well, last year we operated on X number of $1 million and now we need to add like Y number of millions of dollars when, we've talked about going back and saying, well, are there ways that you can make certain things cheaper? Are there redundancies that you can kind of fix so that we're consolidating a little bit here and save the town money? And I think that's really important. I don't know that, again, I just find the timing a little bit problematic because we've known about this since August. So I wish that we were having the chance to do that work back this whole time. Like, I don't know why all of a sudden there's this like rush to do all of these things. I just think it's really unfortunate. Like, I wish we had time to sort of have these departments like dig in and say, let's explain. I thought that whole thing was kind of a shock with that school committee meeting. And so, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I guess it's just sort of a little bit of regret that this whole thing has sort of come out the way that it has, because I wish that we could have both dug in to why it is the way it is, and also then provided our other departments who weren't necessarily having these financial challenges where they're over and above what they said they were going to do, putting them in a position where, they're not going to be able to get the override that they might need to, which is another reason why I'd like to hear from the fire chief and the DPW and all that, to see their thoughts as well. So it's not just the schools.
Thanks, Liz. Allison and Brian.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a simple, there needs to be an assessment that the principals do along, to Andrew's point, like working together, and that's not been done in the 3 years that I've been on the finance. And that, you go through the classrooms, does every classroom need a teacher's aide? Like real details that are done to say, this is what we really need this year. Because to the point that many have made, there's no evaluation through each school to say, okay, we met in our English, with our English department, we met in our custodial department, it's just basically an addition to the budget. There's really no evaluation and assessment that is very detailed to say, we realize that we're double dipping here and we can cut, an aide, we can cut this position. And then also these initiatives that we've rolled out, to see if they've been helpful. Do we really need, stipends for, coaches for restorative? Do we need, this, like all of these, they're not being used in certain they're not all being used, whatever it may be, but there's a lack of detail-oriented processes. And I think, it might change going forward, but we've known this since July that we were over and in a deficit. And unfortunately, I just didn't think that we put enough time into looking at where we could evaluate it more so. And obviously this is the biggest budget. So, and what I did find from Chief King last year, I mean, when they took in ARPA money, we had asked if they had budgeted for an additional police officer next year for the 2025, and they had done it. And I was so impressed with that. So they were making the right changes, that they had received funding from the state, and they were putting it into their budget and working it in. So, unfortunately, when you're at an increase of 9%, you're going to have to do a little bit more, and when you have the biggest budget, and it's not saying, but it's proving your point that, hey, we need this position, but guess what? We realized we didn't need this. It's a go hand in hand. So I think that assessment and that detailed line item is very important, especially when you're seeing these increases and you need such a high override. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Brian?
Yeah, I just want to jump on what Macy and Andrew said, is I do think there should be a change in how they look at it. Like, today's the first time I looked at the sheet that they have on the PowerPoint for the school detail, and I actually have a very difficult time trying to figure it out, because it's, in some of the comments, I just don't understand, and I don't think it's simple, and I think it's hard to follow. But like what you said, I think that my thought would be, like, every principal at every school should be responsible for their budget, and there should be a monthly update. They should look at, like, last year, month to date and year to date, and look at it on a monthly basis and get evaluated on that. And it should be rolled up into a larger budget, so because one of the issues was, we didn't know last August how much they were going to be off, or last June and July. We knew they were going to be off, but nobody knew how much, and everybody reads the papers, and the number was bouncing around because nobody was really sure. And I think if they had a process where they followed it on a monthly basis, and they were held responsible for it, they'll be a lot more responsible for it. They'll be looking at things. That's what I think they should do.
Thank you, Brian. Judy?
Thank you. My question may seem a little off the subject right now, but it does go back to it. My understanding that we were going to have the override on the April election ballot because the notifications for non-contractor renewal for teachers, that override would be done by the time the contracts require that notices go out. And Tom, you mentioned earlier that the select board may have this override in June, which would be a special election, and long after the notices would go out. Does anyone have any information on that? Do you have more information?
I do not, Judy. This is something they're probably going to contemplate at tomorrow's meeting.
Okay.
Perhaps.
The only thing that I would say is that I believe in the past, the overrides go to town meeting first, and then the election is usually in June.
Okay.
That's what's up.
So we're going on past practice of town meeting votes for an override, says it's good, and then it goes to the citizens of the town in a special election.
Correct. That has been historically what's happened. This year, the select board was asked to do it in April because of the teacher contract.
All right, thank you for that.
I guess I would tweak just one little thing of what was just said, which is, and I confirmed this with Nick at our last meeting, the select board, the town meeting doesn't say yes or no, we want an override. The town meeting votes on,
The amount.
but yeah, amount A in this budget if there's an override, amount B in this budget if there's not an override. So just- it's a nitpick, but we're not.
I appreciate that.
So would you consider, this? If at town meeting, the member body says, yes, we approve the override budget, then the voters in the town either say yes or no. So there's a process where it goes to town meeting first, where they either approve the override budget or not. And then the electorate says yes or no to the override. And if those two things don't match, what happens? The town vote becomes the override then of a town meeting vote. Do I make sense?
Yeah, Liz.
Yes, I asked this question of Nick the last time when we were here. And so if Jay will correct me when I'm wrong, but so what's gonna happen here is that the people of the town are gonna vote first. If the people of the town vote no, town meeting can still vote on that second budget that would conform to an override situation. And my understanding is that then the select board would have to put it up for another vote within, I think it's like 35 days or something. If the townspeople vote yes and town meeting votes no, then I think it's kind of dead in the water. If the people vote yes and town meeting votes yes, then that's the new tax rate. That's my understanding based on, he didn't have to correct me. That's my understanding of what
No,
happens.
that's how Nick explained it.
Yeah, when Nick explained it. Thank you.
I must not understood it correctly when he did, and it just, I think the way that I heard it tonight was they aren't sure whether they're gonna do April or June, so that was my concern, that no one can decide yet which month to pick to send it to the voters. Thank you, everyone, for your input.
Jay?
I've got a couple things. One thing about the schools, I don't want to spend too much time talking about that, but I think everybody's had good points about sort of cost management, but I don't know how much it should cost to educate public school students. So what I would do is look at our peers. What are they spending? And we've all heard about the per pupil spending. We all know that compared to our peers, we're down at the bottom of per pupil spending. So is that a guarantee we're spending every dollar correctly? It's not a guarantee, but it's a pretty good sign if we're spending a lot less per pupil than our peers. I did want to say something sort of not on the subject of the schools. Sure. And it's thinking back to what some of the speakers were talking about at the beginning of the meeting, which is, okay, if we pass a level service budget, how does that get us through the next couple of years? And my brain started going back, and I think in the halcyon days of 6 months ago, the town employees probably were thinking, okay, what can we put together that'll get us through the next few years? And I'm reading people's mind here, so don't take it too literally. But what I imagine happened is that the level service alone budget ask came in so high that everyone, be you a select board member, be you a town employee, whoever, said the level service ask is so high. Level service plus needs is even higher. Level service plus needs plus a cushion to get us through the next 5 years is even higher. What are we going to do? So coming back to why are we here tonight, is that something we could give some advice to the select board about? Could we say, select board, you should really give some thought to not only level service, but needs? Or not only level service, but a cushion for future years, and that's even more important than filling these needs. Or needs are really important and a cushion for future years is important. That may be some wisdom that we want to pass on to the select board. Is that a segue for me to share a PowerPoint?
I wanted to kind of wait till the discussion was done and then kind of move
Okay.
to that. I think we
Can I
have some
ask
more
a
hands up.
question to Jay?
Brian and then Lori.
I mean, you say we're not spending to what our peers are.
Okay.
Who are our peers?
That's a good question and part of my PowerPoint. If I can share my screen just to show one slide from last year, it's what I'm talking about, and you've probably seen me mention this group in the past. I have a group of 23 towns that the Town Government Study Committee looked at a couple years ago, and I've used them as my benchmark. And I have a different PowerPoint that I'm going to be talking about in a few minutes, and I can show you who they are and why they're a good group. It's a group of towns within 495. Their names are at the bottom if you're looking at that. It's I can say a bit more about who they are and what
I guess, like, why aren't you including all towns within 40?
all 350.
Or, sure, where do we stand? I don't know the answer, but where do we stand to everything?
That
Or
all within
just all towns
495.
within
Okay.
495?
That's a good question.
I would look at that and say, I wouldn't want that cherry picked, you know?
No, and that's why I like my list, because I didn't cherry pick it. It was the Town Government Study Committee made this list 2 years ago, and I just took what they gave. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We'll get into this a bit more.
It might be right, I'm not disputing it,
Yeah.
but I'd like to know, I'd rather see it in the state of Massachusetts, or maybe like surrounding towns.
And I guess
County, no.
we do have it compared to the state of Massachusetts. We're in the bottom 2/3 of the state of Massachusetts. Why I don't love that is because that's a whole lot of towns in Western Mass. And so I like it a bit more with these, a smattering of ones that are mostly within 495. But
Yeah.
maybe let's put a pin in this and get back to it in a few minutes.
Just curious.
There's some other, Brian, there's some other data too that we have in those slides that kind of
Yep.
maybe show some of the differences between the peer communities.
You've got a
Lori and then Allison.
I just wanted to make a comment about the other departments. I think when we were talking about town departments versus the school departments, and the town departments, they come in so low all the time. But I think there probably are efficiencies to be had. But there's not huge staffing numbers, so I think we never talk about it. And the town departments, if they don't spend all of their money, they give it back to the town at the end of the year. And the schools don't give back money. Ever. And just as a comparison, and this is, kind of like compared to another community, but is it relevant? Wellesley gives back $1 million. The schools from Wellesley give back $1 million a year, which is like crazy.
Yeah.
But they're probably getting more and not. And I think that's what allowed the school department here to build up their reserves so that they could get out of that $4 million problem that they had, short of $500,000 that they needed the town to cover in July.
Allison.
I wanted to make a point about the spending per people. When I moved here over 10 years ago, we were ranked in the top 25 for top schools, and we were at the same, collecting the same amount, and we were at, a spending per pupil. I think it's important to note that, per pupil spending does not guarantee a higher level education or a good school district. The teachers, the curriculum, the student demographics, and effective management of financials will determine how we are successful in the town. So I think it's important to know that, on an average, national average, national average is around 15,000 for spending per pupil. So, and we are at a deficit. When we noticed years ago, when we were getting an increase, we weren't using it to foster positions that would change the learning loss. We were fighting for interventionists. And one year we had budgeted for it and we didn't even spend the money. So, when we talk about, the spending per pupil, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that the positions that we were allocating for, because once we give the money, we don't do an evaluation of those positions that we gave the money for. So, that's really important to note when we talk about spending per pupil. It's an overall effectiveness of each of these categories that make for a stellar school area, stellar school system. So, I think that's important to know, because we're picking and choosing, amongst what towns but, when it comes to, the average amongst all of, the national average, we're above the national average. And it really is a management of all these categories that make us successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Allison, that was a good point. I appreciate you speaking up and saying that. Sometimes throwing money at an issue doesn't really solve the problems or is indicative. But just as to a previous point, in terms of the school practices, watch that last school committee meeting. They'll tell you exactly what they did. Historical numbers, move those forwards, and then add.
And that's
That was from a member of the school committee. Watch the meeting, and they'll tell you, we can't do that anymore. There's conversation about it. So that's why I said in the beginning of the meeting, watch that meeting.
Oh, so they're addressing it, you're saying?
I'm
sorry.
I don't know.
Just clarifying what you're saying.
They called it out.
Yeah, they called it out.
Okay, good.
I don't really know.
Okay.
There was no conversation in the meeting about what they're actually doing. But I was just saying, just to the point where how they kind of structured their budget. Lori?
I would just say that Katie has done this job and she's got the licenses associated with this job from the state. She knows what she's doing. So she identified, when she was trying to build 26, she realized that the 25 budget was not high enough because the 24 actuals were higher than the 25 budget. And then as she further delved into it, the 24 budget, it was the same as the 24 budget. They're just not looking at actuals. You do a budget and then you look at your actuals.
I mean, that's scary, right?
That's extremely scary, yeah.
And but either,
But that was then. And she started on July 1st.
either they're haven't done it historically, or they don't have the right tools to be able to do it easily. And if it's the latter, then it's dumb. And if it's the former, then it's malfeasance, right? So, and I'm not saying it is malfeasance, and I'm not saying that they're mismanaging the budget, but if we were to look at the town as like a diversified company, and $174 million in revenue, right? That's a pretty big company, and really what you should have is smart, consolidated thinking about things. You'd have a CTO, you'd have a CFO, and not that the CTO would make decisions, and I'm just going to stick to that because it's an easy example for me, make decisions for every department, but what would you do as a consolidated company? You'd do all of your land management under a certain group. You'd do all your power purchasing in a consolidated manner. You do acquisition, everything from toilet paper to pencils in a consolidated manner to save money. And the same with technology. And you'd also have a roadmap. And being new to the committee, everything I keep hearing I don't get the sense that there is this like grand stewardship that's happening. And it's happening in all these silos, and what happens is when you set a budget as a family, you have a fixed income in the family, and like somebody needs braces, somebody needs sports equipment, and it all kind of happens, and it happens collectively for the collective good. When you have an extended family, they behave very differently because they're all interested in their own little small family unit rather than as the extended family. And so that's what I'm afraid is happening in the schools. And I don't want to pick on just the schools. Only reason I do it is because they represent such a large portion of the budget, and benefits really, that's where I'd want to dig in also. Then I look at IT. They're spending less than $1 million a year, which is like insane to me. So what that tells me is they're either not investing enough, or all these different departments have an IT line item in there. And so the question becomes, are they doing it smartly and doing it for the collective benefit, or are they managing it in a centralized manner?
If I'm not mistaken, I believe that there's vendor warrants. When they need to be paid, they get driven, signed off, and then driven to town hall to drop off the vendor warrants.
Crazy, right? Why are we wasting time for someone to drive over and two people to manually handle a piece of paper when things can be done more efficiently?
You have Adobe Pro.
Peter, then Ron.
Yeah, in your example though, I think there's somebody has the checkbook in the family, even the extended, somebody's writing the check, somebody's saying yes or no. I don't know where that is in the process we're talking about here. I do agree that Katie seems to be on top of it. She had the right amount of righteous anger over the fact that, she couldn't get her budget together because the numbers didn't work out. And I think she's on top of it. But again, she's keeping score. The folks who are playing the game are out on the field doing it, right? And I don't know where the connection is and where the pressure point is, where the accountability is, who gets to say yes or no to things. I know there, anecdotally, one of the classrooms was out of paper, and okay, that should be easy. We should have paper if we're doing artwork or whatever it is. There's a lot. It's complex. It's a big budget. It's very complex, but I don't know how things are processed and whether that's an efficient way of. Is it the principals who are in charge of their schools, or is it, as we suggested before, central processing? The budget is set and you put in your recs, and if there's money, you get it, and if there isn't, you don't. I don't know that process, and I think that's really what it is when the question was asked, what do you want to see? What I want to see is a process that we could trust, so that whatever the number is that comes up, we can say with confidence, okay, because we can trust the process. I'm just too new to this to trust the process right now.
I think Katie is developing the process.
Great.
Ron? And then Brian.
I just had just a couple of thoughts. I really think that it's good to hear the passion and the ideas. I personally would say it'd be nice to hear from the school board before we speculate too far. I think we're talking with the lack of information. I think anyone can criticize things. I would say these are professionals. I personally have faith that they're all doing the best they can. It's very complex, and I feel like we're being a little negative. I just don't know, when we talk about malfeasance, stewardship, lack of, I would just be careful. I think if we were hiring these people purely to run P&L statements, and their job is just to drive profit, I wouldn't want them teaching my kids. They're educators, their job is to raise children in schools, and a lot of those things are immeasurable, right? Are there healthy kids coming out of schools? I don't look at a profit sheet to determine that. So I would just give them some credit. I think they've done okay. I think there's some financial concerns we can talk about, but I would never say that there's been malfeasance unless there's some evidence of that. I think just that kind of language doesn't help. So my thought is, we could talk more about it, but I don't know if we're making progress here right now. I think we're each talking about ideas about what maybe isn't working well. I'd like to hear from the school board. I think they probably have some presentation we can share, clarify things for us and inform us and educate us. And then maybe we can have an opinion. That's just my thought.
Brian, you're next, but just segue on what Ron said, it's a good point. I like the conversation now in terms of the spitballing at least, and not about anger or accusatory in any way, but these are all questions. They'll be in the room. You ask them directly. What are you doing? What's different? How do we know? How can you show us? Is this in writing? Those types of things. And I think it's going to be a good opportunity, but thanks, Ron. But I do appreciate the conversation because I think it kind of puts us in maybe a spot where we can think about what's important to us and ask. Brian?
I didn't actually have anything.
Okay.
No, but you're right about that, and I don't want to. I shouldn't even have used that word, but really, for people that have been on the committee for a number of years, a lot of these answers should be common knowledge, and that it's not makes me concerned about the process. And that, again, if the process has been, let's take next year's number and add something to it, that's for such a large line item as people looking after taxpayer dollars, that really concerns me.
Well, I could say something.
Yeah, if you want to. keep pointing at you.
I think basically I think the issue might be the process, and my position is, I think there needs to be an improvement in the process, and I bet they would agree with that too. I'm sure Katie certainly agrees with that. And I do think there should be some changes. Milton actually is, if you want to know, the top school, while Milton is like 276 out of 397 schools in spending. So we're like in the 40%-ish.
So it was what, 270?
Low is 40.
Are we talking total dollars?
Dollars. As of 2023, which is the latest data.
Sure, but if you're comparing to like a small town in Western Mass.
Well, you could go the other way too. The top, you wouldn't even believe who the top town is for spending.
Weston.
Boston.
Provincetown. Spend triple what we spent, 4 times. Provincetown, Orleans, Cambridge, Truro, Martha's Vineyard. Those are the top 5. And then it's charter schools.
Is it
Wellfleet. It's mostly the
per
Cape.
student?
But what I wonder though, the Cape has,
Per student.
they're combined, like Wellfleet, Provincetown, and Truro, they're combined with, is it Nauset or so that's another question I have, because because their towns are small, they combine them together as regional schools.
Regionals.
So I'm pretty sure that Provincetown, Truro, Wellfleet, and even Eastham, they are combined. I don't know.
Might
I'm
be,
just saying, so
but they're the
I'm just
top
wondering whether that's
expenditures.
skewed. That's all. And I mean, I think the best comparison for us, and I don't mean to take over because Brian's still talking, is really to compare towns that are similar to Milton. And like in terms of population, medium income, that's where I would see, I think, a convincing comparison. Because if we're comparing ourselves to, I saw a town today at work that I've never heard of. It was like way out nowhere. Really little town.
New Marlboro?
Maybe, let's compare New Marlboro, right? So then you wonder, like, how is Milton comparing New Marlboro? Not just the dark skies and light trespass, but in terms of student population and things like that. So I just think it'd be helpful to look at perhaps something like Hingham. I don't mean, I'm just throwing it out there. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know, I can't compare.
I think we might have something.
Jay
But
just
no, but I'm
got
just
really
thinking,
excited.
Like, really,
Just
you know,
building you up.
you know,
Careful what you ask
yeah,
for.
towns that you can really compare. That's all. That's what I'm saying. But, and I'm sorry to hijack your
That's it.
your
Hingham
time.
spends like
I think Belmont's the
$2,000
comparison.
Yeah,
Belmont is the
Belmont
town.
seems to kind of fit the thing. Now, does anyone, I'm gonna kind of put it out here, it's 8:45, anyone have anything else they'd like to kind of just get off your chest? Just about,
We're close to Belmont. Really close.
so I think this might be a good segue. Jay put together a PowerPoint. Jay and I spoke about the PowerPoint. It was mentioned last week. I talked to Jay more, we put a little more data in, and it gives a little bit of a different look. It's certainly not complete, I mean, there's more we can do, but if no one really has anything they'd like to comment, there's about 15 slides we can finish up with, talk about if we'd like, and then I'll just talk about our future schedule and just what to be ready for in the upcoming couple of weeks. So if it's okay with everybody, I'd like to maybe just have Jay go through these slides and maybe tell us what you think.
Okay. I will share my screen. So my intent was not to look at any particular budget, not to get too far into numbers, but just sort of to lay the groundwork. Where are we now? Before an override, where do we stand? I note here that the numbers are about a year old, some more old. It's really to give a high-level presentation of where do we stand now. So I want to start with how have our taxes gone up since the last override? The last override was FY18. What's happened since then? And I'm looking at the average tax bill. So, okay, there's 3 lines on the first graph. The average tax bill is the one that starts out in the middle and ends up at the bottom. It's the flat line that ends up at the $1.21. For $1 in taxes in FY18, the average tax bill, it's gone up by 21%. Now, some of that is due to new growth, people building new houses, people adding onto their house, like I did in FY19. But for the most part, we can assume that's how taxes have gone up. Now, how have they compared to inflation? It exceeded inflation for the first few years, but then inflation exceeded it. So now our taxes are lower than inflation. And when I say inflation, I'm talking about specifically CPI-W, and that's what's used for Social Security increase. So I'm not an expert on Social Security, but I'm pretty sure that that means Social Security paychecks have gone up faster than average single-family tax bill in the past since FY18. People can correct me if they're Social Security experts. And then, so that's Social Security and inflation. Average income in Milton, I've got that over the past several years. That's gone up quite a bit more than the average taxes. So, okay. And on the right, I just have the same story told in a different way. Inflation adjusted average tax. It's now, our taxes are lower than they were after the last override once you adjust for inflation. What do I have next? Okay. I skipped one.
Yeah, growth of property.
Yes. I was thinking of you, Andrew, when I made this. Some warrant committee members, who I just named, have asked about property values as a way of measuring the benefit we get from the town government. So I looked at I had to actually dig through the town reports on the town clerk's website, and they went back to 2014. And so I could grab the total real estate value since 2014 and the total taxes that we collect. And that includes, you can see a subtle bump from 2017 to 2018. So even with that override, and in 2017, our taxes have gone up by 40%, but our home values have gone up by over 80%. So I'm not sure if that's a good way of measuring our return, but it's what was requested, so.
No, it's a great data point. And,
Yeah.
the thing I'd be really interested in, and don't do it, is understand what the median numbers are.
Yeah, what I have, and I shouldn't even say home values. This is the total property in town,
Yeah.
total. So, a median, I don't have that.
And don't do it.
no.
But the point being to make sure that there are no outlier numbers that are skewing this. But this is this is one really good data point that says, hey, we're getting the value that we want. And just so everybody's clear, and I've said this before, I really think we should invest heavily in the town, right? And high quality schools result in smarter kids, better property values, better residents, better people, like, and I just want to make sure that these investments big investments that we make are sound ones.
Okay? Yes.
If our taxes are based on the percentage value of the property, right?
I'm not going to say right to that.
Okay, maybe that's not.
Because, keep in mind, so our total, ignoring new growth for a second, our total, when you don't have an override, our total taxes can go up by 2.5%. So if everybody's property goes up by 25%, doesn't matter. Everybody's taxes only goes up by 2.5%. Am I reading your mind? Is that what you're about to ask?
I'm wondering if this is, that there are bigger homes being built. I don't know. Like,
No, I understand what you're saying, yeah.
because I would think if the house is worth $1 million, let's say, and it goes up to 1.1, the tax rate should go up proportionately.
If you look at our tax rate, the taxes we pay per $1,000 on home value, that's gone down year after year. And that's telling the same story as this, because the value of our houses is going up faster than the taxes we're paying. So if everybody's house goes up by 25% next year, everybody's taxes will only go up by 2.5% without an override.
And the taxes is based on the assessment of the house. The value is the real estate value of the house, if you were to sell it. I mean, they're two different things.
I'm not
because-
distinguishing between
Yeah, it's two
those.
different things, because if you're paying, the value of your house, of the tax that you're paying is based on the assessment by the town versus the property value is if you put it on the market and sell it. So it's a market value versus an assessment. So I'm just saying that they're two different.
They're two different numbers,
Two
but
different
from a
numbers.
taxpayer perspective,
right.
what do you care about? Like,
Right.
what is the value of my
So
home?
your taxes are based on the assessment, not the necessary, the real estate market.
value.
Right.
But that's an attempt to get the market value.
Well, it's, again, different, because you can have a house that's assessed at 800,000, but if you sell it for 1.2, 1.1 or 2, there's a difference, right? And then after it's sold, does it get reassessed? That's up to the town. So I'm just saying that I just want to clarify that there are two different values here. One's the assessment, one is the actual market value, as Lori said. She said it perfectly.
Okay.
The trend still looks.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, either way,
Yes, I'm not disputing, I'm just saying.
if that's the assessed value, that means the market value is even greater, and so there's an even greater delta.
It's a great number.
And so.
Good slide.
All right.
It's a
No,
good
no, I don't
slide.
want you to
And I
say-
almost skipped it. We've got a hand raised.
Judy.
Thank you. When I was.
Judy?
Yes, hello?
Hello?
My audio's on.
You're so cute.
We can hear you.
We hear you.
Oh, okay. When I was looking into, assessed values about a month ago, I think, the formula for determining assessment does include recently sold properties in any given municipality. So for assessments for 2025, they're gonna look at sold properties, I believe, and I don't have that note in front of me. They look at all sold properties for 23. They include that in part of the calculation that they base your assessment on. It's a very complicated process, but every municipality does it. And maybe we could have Nick clue us in better than I am on how they incorporate that. It's actually in the town website on assessments. It's also in Hingham. I was looking at assessments in Hingham. And so that is part. And if you look closely, at your assessed value, and then just do something as simple as go to Zillow and see what they think your house is worth. They're gonna more closely align than you think. The market value that you could sell for today, it all depends on where the market is. There could be very low inventory, and so, you know, you put it on the market, and because there's only 10 houses in Milton for sale, somebody is more than willing to pay a little bit extra if they really want to acquire a property in this town. So now, that goes into new assessment values for all properties. Like the market level is here, but it's always behind a little bit. So if you get your tax bill for, you know, August and, August and November, you're gonna see that as the assessed value change to a different number, and it might more closely align to what Zillow says your house is worth, which we all know that's not accurate really, because, you know, Zillow doesn't know that you have a modern kitchen now, and so you could sell it for a little bit more.
Tom, can I ask a question of the other committee members? And so earlier I said,
Judy, you done?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you,
yeah,
sorry.
so what I said, the three things that I care about is what's the quantity of services, what is the quality of the services, and what are the property values. And that those three things to me are what I believe the value I'm deriving from the taxes that I pay in town. What does everybody else care about? And what are the things that would say that you're getting fair value or it's worth spending more in real estate taxes? Like, what would you want back in return? Or, if anything different than those three things.
Anybody? Jay?
Well, I think we're working towards this. I would say I can live in Milton and pay a certain amount of taxes, or I can live in one of these other towns. How does, you know, value is part of it, but how does what I'm paying and what I'm getting in Milton compared to these other towns? And I really can't answer unless I look at these other towns, which is a preview of my coming slides.
Anyone else, Liz?
Well, my thing is, I don't know that my personal opinion really matters. I think that for me, being in the Warrant Committee, I would say that I think that the people should vote on whether or not they want an override and let the people of Milton decide what they value. So personally, I moved here because it's close to the city, the schools are good, it's a pretty safe town, I could afford it. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it. I like to live in the South Shore versus the North Shore, I don't know, near the ocean. So, but for me, I mean, I just really would value people being able to have that voice and having a vote on the override, because I don't know what the whole town values, and there are a lot of people, and some people like me really value the schools, and then there are people who don't necessarily want to pay additional money in taxes, and they might vote against it. So I think we have to kind of hear from everybody, but it's kind of my opinion.
I think there's some common threads that everyone can agree with. I mean, not service-based, but like, you know, location, kind of geographical proximity, quasi, I don't want to say rural, but sorry.
New Marlboro, New Marlboro, New Marlboro.
Every state that's loaded. Should we say a more, how about more thickly settled? Or a sleepier? But like, I mean, those are the common things, but I think that I think schools would be a huge thing. You know, I think that if, you know, you're married, you're looking to buy, you have children, you're looking to come into a community, you know, maybe, I mean, Milton gives certainty where Boston does not, right? Like, you may want to go to the Murphy School in Dorchester, but child may have to go somewhere else. But I think schools is a huge thing. I
No,
think
and-
really school, I think it's a combination, that's just
Warrant
from,
committee, I mean, that's.
hey, the best warrant committee. But these are things I think, I kind of have a mix of, I'm just trying to answer your question, like a mix of the services. Like I like my trash getting picked up every week and my leaves.
Like not
My
having to go
leaves.
to the dump.
Yeah, but
I still love going to the dump. But also, you know, like I said, the schools and some other things, so it's like a mix.
But
of-
you're hitting the nail on the head, and it's not, it's a question of, for every additional dollar in taxes, what would you want in this town, assuming you stay here, and is it quality of service? Do you want better trash service? Do you want more frequent quantity, more frequent trash pickup?
Throw everything away. Right?
Exactly, and so that's the root of the question. Are there any other factors? Because if I had to write the comment on the warrant to justify an override, and I'm not volunteering, as a matter of fact, I'm just for the record, I'm explicitly saying that I do not want to do, but I'd want to say, hey, for these additional tax dollars, these are the things that you're getting, and here's why I think it's justified, because your property values are increasing. Your kids are going to get a better education. You're going to be able to throw everything away, and that you don't pay for trash pickup anymore. And then let each town person decide, are these things valuable to me on that basis? Because they may be so hyper focused on schools, they're not thinking about the fact that their property values have far outpaced the amount of relative taxes that they've been paying. Still hurts more, but then if you look at it financially, you may say, hey, like my home has more value. I'm a senior, I want to stay in town. It's worth it for me to take a reverse mortgage, for example, so like crazy example. But the point is, like, what value are you getting for what we're asking for is.
Can I just add something quick? I also want to add that sometimes there are things that you can't pay a price for.
Yep.
I mean, the example would be, like I said, I don't want to speak on behalf of the town, but just speaking on behalf of my own family, we picked Milton 20-something years ago because of the diversity of this town. We wanted our kids to go to school with a lot of different types of kids, and that's one of the things to consider, because if you're talking about an override and taxes are too high, you're going to end up excluding certain families from coming to live here, or it's going to be to a point where it's intimidating, or it's too high. So that's just something to balance and weigh when considering taxes. Schools are very important, but do you want to get into a town that becomes homogeneous and of a certain income level? Yes, maybe for some people. I'm not saying yes or no for that, but that's just some things to consider, because, I mean, people always forget schools, but part of it's also your community. Who are your neighbors? Who do you want your children to go to school with? Do you want your children to look next to them and say, oh, I see someone who looks like me and can relate to me at a different level? There's just a lot of factors, and it's not just race, gender, ethnicity, it's everything. Socioeconomic factors too, that I would like my kids to go to school. I don't want everyone to look and be just like, so I think that's like, you can't really put a value on that, diversity. And so, I mean, that's a consideration in terms of taxes, because you're gonna, there's, possible preclusion for that. That's all, that's what I'm saying. So there's like no value to that. You can't pay for that.
No, and I agree,
can't, I mean-
agree with everything that everybody values on this table. And the question is, what are the things that can we tie that people are willing to pay or not pay for the additional tax dollars that we're asking for? Because
Ron.
How many slides you got, Jake?
Oh, I was gonna say.
I've got a few more.
No, there's about 10 more left.
I've got a few more.
So,
Can I proceed?
then.
Yeah, have we answered Andrew's question too?
Yeah, no,
Jay, move on.
Okay.
I appreciate that thought, Andrew.
Right. So,
Very good question.
moving on. All right, I want to get into what we talked about a little bit, which is what are the peer communities that I'm going to be doing comparisons to? So this is a group of communities that over the next few slides, I'm going to be looking, the peer communities I'm looking at are a list of the town government study community, the town government study committee used as a comparison in 2023. So over the next few slides, we'll see a lot of information about them, what they have in common with Milton, and how they show a range of differences. I'd say they're a sampling of cities, towns, mostly within 495. Now you can see there's one outlier. I think that's Ludlow out there. Not sure how that got in the mix, but I'm not questioning it. But they're almost all within 495. They're all towns. They are not cities. And it was, I like this group because it was selected as a good comparison by the Town Government Study Committee before we started looking at override. It wasn't pre-selected for any financial outcome. I don't want to shut down any discussion, but there, we could have more, we could have fewer, we could have ones that are geographically closer to us. But I'd like to sort of talk about this group, and then if we want to look at a different group after that, we can. So who are these towns and how are they similar to us? So here's the size. We've got a range of sizes. And we've got a range of sizes, and Milton is right around the middle, just a little bit below the average, just a little bit above the median. And so we've got some that are larger than us, some that are smaller than us. We've got, although we have about the same population as the average, we have a lot fewer single-family houses than the average, which to me makes me assume maybe we have we have a lot more single-family houses than the other. I can't even read my own graph, which to me makes me think we probably have fewer multifamily housing. But both of these show we've got a range of different sizes in this group. Now, what about financially? How do these towns compare? So we've got per capita income, again, a big range. On the low end, below $50,000 per capita income. On the high end, you're getting up to near 150,000, over 150,000. Then there's Wellesley blowing us all away. But we've got a big range here. And Milton is below average, below the median, below the mean. But for single-family home values, we're doing a little bit better. We're a lot closer to the average when it comes to single-family home values. But again, we've got a big range of towns we're looking at. And then for the town budget, so on the left side, we've got the revenue, which is what's the total town budget. We are below average, but we're pretty much in the range of, you got that middle 50% or so. It's all in the 100 to 150 million group. We're in there with most of them. And then on the right-hand side, not many people will be surprised by this. I ranked them all in what percentage of taxes do they get from residential versus commercial and other. And we're near the top. There are others that are up there with us, but we're certainly near the top. And even though we're near the top, quite at the top of the list, more than half the list, so we're at 93% taxes coming from residential, more than half the list is 80% or more coming from residential. So even though they have more taxes coming from commercial and industrial, it's a matter of opinion as to how significant that is. So those three slides just sort of tell us who are these towns we're looking at and how are they similar or different for us. So let's start doing some comparisons. All right, the big one, taxes. What are our taxes? If I'm wondering, I've alluded to this all evening, if I'm wondering, are we a high tax town or not? I can't look at that in a vacuum. I have to look at that compared to our peers, compared to someone else. And if we look at this list of peers, we are below average. So you'll hear around town, people will assert, people in the past have asserted at town meetings without any facts to back it up. Milton is a high tax town because we have a low commercial base. Well, that's arguable. It looks like we're a average tax town or a little bit below average. I'm going to expound on this next slide. This is just a busier version of the same slide. I wanted to hammer out, okay, which of these are mostly residential? The ones with a little greenhouse get more than 90% of their taxes from residential. The ones with the red shopping cart get less than 80% from residential. And so what can we take from this? Well, in general, the ones that have more commercial industrial have lower taxes. In general, those with more residential have higher taxes. But that's in general, but it's not necessarily. I mean, you can look at Westwood, Needham, Lexington, all have quite a bit of commercial tax property and still have significantly higher average taxes than Milton. Don't know what to take away from that, but it's something to think when people tell you we're a high tax town. Yes?
What are the Lions sales? Is that $5,000 increase in the Lions?
Correct. $5,000 increments. Yep. If you think this one's busy, wait till you get to the next slide. Should I move on? All right.
So the argument, we have to grow the commercial base is not the solution, not necessarily the solution.
Yeah, I'm trying. Not necessarily, I think, is a good way of putting it. I think,
We're not the only.
growing the commercial base would probably take a little bit of stress off the taxpayers. But if our,
But it may not.
if we went from 93% residential to 83% residential, okay, taxes would go down by about 10%, not exactly, but the range of taxes in this graph is a lot more. So if you're asking me for a conclusion, I think it would help, but maybe not to the extent some people think it would.
Would expect it to, yes.
Yeah.
I think the expectation is very high.
Yeah, and again, sort of going back to the opposite direction of, oh, our taxes are so high because of this reason. Well, no, it's not so high, and no, it's not because of this reason.
Right.
Now, this one I call my Cameron graph, because like Cameron in the art museum, you got to look at it for a while. I like graphs that you can just glance at and know what they're saying. And I didn't, I'm not there with this one. But it's telling us the same thing as the previous graphs. Along the vertical axis is how much we get from residential. On the horizontal axis is how much we pay in taxes. You can see we're at the top. We have the highest residential, but a lot of places have higher taxes than we do. If somebody's a graphic designer and can help me make this look better, I'd appreciate it. Okay. And then I just looked at how average taxes have grown since 2017. This one shocked me. I had to double and triple check it. And I'm just looking at the average tax from Department of Revenue since 2018 till now. All of those peers that I listed, all of them except little bitty Swampscott, God love them. Everybody else has had average taxes grow more than we have by a good bit. So none of these slides are going to make people say, hooray, an override is making our taxes go up. But maybe they'll make people say, oh, it's okay. An override is a little more tolerable. Now, one thing that I've heard concerns expressed, I've heard them in select board meetings, I've heard them just around town of, this is a big override, and I'm not arguing that this is a big override. It's, every year we put it off, the pill we had to swallow gets bigger. I'm not disagreeing with that. But if we look at our peers, out of 23 peers, 7 of them have had tax increases of more than 10% in a single year. That's almost a third. So yes, it does happen that towns do tax increases that are more than 10% in 1 year. It's a big pill to swallow, but it's not unprecedented. It happens.
And these all passed.
Yeah. So I'm not looking at overrides. These are surely overrides, but I'm just looking at the average tax in year 1 and the average tax in year 2.
Yeah, I can speak to Belmont. Belmont's first override failed, and they had to bring it back.
When did that
They lower
happen?
the amount.
2020, that'll lower the amount.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just can speak to Belmont. They wanted to do some building, the tax, so that's where that, but it was significantly higher than that 11.1, which is still a big number.
Yeah, it's a big.
Okay. And so then I bring it all home with a final graph, which is, so this is the average taxes again, 2024 numbers. And you might remember that we were a little bit below the average of our peers. So I said, well, what if we have an override? And people have been throwing around override numbers from 8.5 million to 11.5 million is what I've heard the most. So I decided, let's look at each one of those. 8.5, 9.5, 10.5, 11.5, what would happen? I've got the picture of apples and oranges here because I'm giving a percent increase to the 2024 taxes. Of course, these will be 2026 taxes. It's just to give us a feel of where things would stand compared to our peers. So I took the percent increase that an override from 8.5 to 11.5 would be, applied it to 2024. And as you can see, before the override, we're a little bit below the average of our peers. We're 11th on this group of 24 towns. After any one of these overrides, We're a little bit below the average of our peers. We're 11th on this group of 24 towns. So we can conclude what we will from that. Everyone can draw their own conclusions from that. But that may lead into what we want to discuss. What we want to discuss as a committee. Do we want to discuss what sort of override we think is prudent? What sort of advice? I'll stop sharing my screen. What sort of advice can we give to the select board? Are you going to be going to the select board giving the advice? Do we want to advise the select board they should give level service? Do we want to advise the select board level service plus needs? Do we want to advise the select board level service plus a cushion? Mr. Chair, is that the sort of discussion we might have?
Well, Jay, I don't know if they want our advice.
I have a bad habit of giving my advice when people don't ask for it.
Yeah.
We know.
Just a comment on that. I'm sorry. But I struggle with the premise that these are peer towns. Like, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know who came up with that or why they came up with it or what their context was. I don't know. I never saw it. But I don't get that, like Brookline or Swampscott or Ludlow or Burlington, you can compare to Milton, you know? And there are sometimes you can, but I wouldn't say any of those towns. I don't know how you could throw them in a basket and just say, compare these.
And
I struggle with the comparisons.
I looked at them against DESI,
Okay.
and I think there were 3 or 4 towns that were not on your list, that they had on their list. And of course, I don't remember what,
Okay.
but,
I've searched for comparable town lists and have failed, so that's why I've been using this one.
whatever.
Yeah, Jay and we discussed this. I always go to Belmont. I don't know
Belmont
why.
is definitely
I
up
just
here.
kind of
You don't need.
going to Belmont and looking at the town,
Yeah,
being, I just always kind of, that's
and all the
always,
demographics match.
that's just,
No, whether they're right or right, they're really interesting data points.
No, they-
And what's difficult is we can't just look at one and say it's right, right? And so there's a lot of different things. You could scorecard it, like where are we plus? Where are we minus? How many pluses do we have relative to minuses? Or what, like, some factors correlate to residential versus commercial, but nonetheless, like, each of those tell a story, a difficult story to tell in a single story, but it's good data points that say, hey, like if we saw anything that was really out of whack, that would be a red flag, right? If we saw that real estate value versus taxes growth inverted, then we'd say something might seriously be wrong. Or if you were consistently at the top or bottom of any of those charts, something would be wrong. And so, you could, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics, right? But, like, I appreciate the work. Short story, I
Thanks.
appreciate the work that you put into it, because God knows I would not have done that.
yeah, I think Jay gave us a really good snapshot, and especially that last slide, where it kind of fills it out, and it kind of gives us an idea. It's also shocking, as Macy had said, like, to look at some of the other towns, look at Brookline. They just took on a huge school thing, look how much their taxes are. Concord, Wellesley, Winchester.
No, thank you for mentioning Macy, because I wrote a note, note Macy's comment. You wrote a comment of, if we have an override, is that going to price people out of living in Milton? That's another thing I take from that last slide is, compared to where? If we have an override, we're still relatively in the same ballpark of the cost to move here.
I was just thinking about Brookline. Brookline has a lot of condominiums, way more than we do, and it's a larger town. I would say it's double the size. But what I found shocking was Westwood has such a commercial base. I know because I contribute to it.
I work there.
I go to Wegmans and Target and Dedham too with Legacy Place. So I was actually surprised to see that their taxes are high, the residential taxes are high, notwithstanding their solid commercial base compared to ours, which is
Yeah, I had this is more of an anecdotal, conversation with someone from Dedham, but, and it's not really, there's no data, but they said sometimes like a place like Legacy Place, while you look at all the money, it creates equally as many problems
Police.
for the town.
Yeah, fire.
So you say, oh, look at all this commercial, but it's not that, they're not getting millions and millions of dollars on coming in the door. So it says it's, you gotta kind of
But you
balance
have
it.
to increase law enforcement, patrol, there's other considerations that we
Accidents.
don't have. Accidents, true.
There's just a whole slew of things that I did not get into, but they just said like the return sometimes isn't as much as you think it's gonna be. It helps
No, that's
tremendously.
an excellent point.
But it's not, there are other things in opposite that draw away from that.
Yeah, for me, all these numbers aren't going to give us the right number. What it will do is give us a sniff test and say, is something real seriously out of whack that we really need to dig into? And I didn't see anything that said, hey, we're doing something seriously wrong.
Yeah, we're not an outlier.
We're not an
We're
outlier.
one standard deviation of all these.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely, for sure. That was really helpful.
And so that tells us we're in the right neighborhood. And so if they ask for a $100 million override, then
So Jay, when the number comes back from the select board, you'll be able to plug that in, those numbers.
I hope that Nick Milano will give me more accurate numbers, but sure.
and I would really want New Marlboro in there. Comparison, please.
Anybody have anything else like to add? Okay. Oh, I don't have anything more. Jay, would you like to say something?
Again, I'd like to give my opinion even when no one asks for it. Does the warrant committee have a feeling that, and maybe we can't, well, I'll just ask. Does the warrant committee have a feeling that we would like to give a recommendation? We are the finance committee of the town. Do we have a feeling that we would like to recommend, maybe not a number? I don't think I'd be comfortable saying a number tonight, but do we want to say, yeah, we think you should do at least level service? Do we want to say you should do level service plus some? We've got these needs that we've been looking at for years, or we have a need for a cushion, financial cushion.
Do people feel comfortable doing that?
I have an amendment.
I'm asking.
I didn't make a motion.
Do people,
Joke.
do people feel comfortable?
I'm not sure, like, I felt like, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but, like, I'm not sure in the schools, like, that, I don't feel like there's a lot of detail there that I know if everything is right or wrong. I'm not saying it is, but I just don't know. So I'm not comfortable saying yes or no on that myself.
Liz?
I would like to hear from the select board, but I also would like to say that, another thing that we could talk about is, should we, I know, again, like, it's up to the select board, but this April versus June thing is very concerning to me.
Okay. And is that because of the teachers?
I just don't understand why we're known for a long time. Let's just get it together. Let people vote. That's how I feel. Just let people vote. I don't profess to know what's in the hearts and minds of everybody in town, so let them speak.
I would think that one possible reason to do the later vote could be maybe they think town's not ready to make an informed vote on this. I don't know, but I could see where you think you rush it and you haven't done the diligence. It could backfire when you propose a number, but hopefully we're doing that diligence.
That's what I want to add, is that, I mean, I think that the reason, just to counter Liz, that we're having this discussion is to provide the information the town needs to make an informed vote. And perhaps the reason it's delayed to June is to gather as much information as possible so that we can inform the public, who has a right to know what goes on behind all these numbers and proposals. So.
Back to your question about the select board, the one thing I would want to ask them is that I would hope that they think about it the same way that we're thinking about it and Jay's looking at it in relative terms. And that if they're not looking at it that way, I'd want to know why. And if they are, I would hope that they would really push to make sure that the town has the infrastructure to give them that information, to let them make informed decisions all the time, not just once a year.
Julia?
Yeah, just in terms of the date, I really think that pushing the date out further would be, not to be overly dramatic about it, but I think it could be really catastrophic for our schools. I think if we claim to, support our teachers, to have them be given out, be given pink slips and to not know their fate until sometime in June is cruel and unusual punishment. And I think that we have the information we need now. Maybe people aren't seeking it out, but it's there. And I think pushing it to June is kicking the can down the road again. I think we lose further confidence in our elected officials, and the teachers, as multiple people have said tonight, are going to go find other jobs, as would I if I were in their position. And that level of turnover, who is going to want to come work for the Milton Public Schools? It's going to be, I'm guessing, less experienced teachers, which, everyone needs to get their start somewhere, but we don't want a huge turnover of experienced teachers all at once. And I really fear for the schools and what that will do to them if we push this override out even further than it already has been.
I don't know, Jay, I'm kind of getting the sense maybe to hold off. Ron?
I think there's some really good information in those slides. I wonder if there's a way we can at least share that, because I think that baseline is useful. And we're not making the decision on how much the override should be, but I think that would be good, Andy's point, for the select board to have that. If they don't already have that, they may have done this research already, but I don't know how many J's are there in this town that do this.
It's not too many J's. There's only one J, and he's on the Warrant Committee. No, I mean, I'll have a conversation. I think this is great data. Let's see if they even pick a number tomorrow. And what transpires. But I just want to tell you, 17th, planning board's coming in. It's Monday. It's evacuation day.
Okay. Is that dependent on if there's a June, if there is a June town meeting, can we push them off for a month?
They're going to do site plan and ADU at the annual. So we have to talk to them.
Okay, I'm not crying.
About that.
I'm crying for a different reason.
St. Patrick's Day.
It's evacuation day.
St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, I'm Scottish,
Oh,
so I don't really care. On the 18th,
Good thing you're not in an elected position.
I know, that's why I said it. I'm
You are running for town meeting again, though.
We're all fooling around. 18th is going to be the schools. The 20th is going to be police and fire. I'm going to try to get somebody else. And
DPW? No?
And DPW if they get back. The 19th we have open. I'm going to see if we can bring in a couple more people on that day.
I'd love to see.
So it's going to be spread out. It's going to be a lot going on.
Nothing more this week?
Well, we have a meeting scheduled currently for Wednesday. So I'm going to ask you to please keep your eye on, I think a lot of this is dependent on what the select board does.
Do you ever have Amy in?
I've put a request in for Amy to come in. And I actually asked if Nick and Amy can come in on Wednesday. And the town administrator was very, said you would expect very pointed questions for Amy if she's gonna come in. So it would be kind of maybe where she got to the budget, just not to bring her in for just to talk.
Judy's hand is up.
Judy?
Thank you. If, and that's like a big question mark now, we had to have a town meeting in June, would that be the only thing on the town meeting agenda? Would be the override? Does anyone have a prediction?
Yeah, the MBTA, Judy, it would probably be the East Milton overlay. It could be the historical district. It could be the light trespass. So they could be adding some things that were sent back at our most recent meeting, giving us a break with the exception of ADU and site plan, and just having like a more substantive June meeting.
Okay, so they're not necessarily slated for the May annual then, those setbacks?
Yeah, the setbacks and some other new articles that they were proposing. And I think it was the intention of Nick to talk to the select board just to kind of back off and give us a little more time, given the short calendar we're looking at.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
Ron?
In the past, the chair of the select board came to talk to some articles. I think that's a great perspective. I don't know if we've had the current chair, but if he has commentary, I mean, it would be awesome to hear from him, not just Nick. You know?
Well, actually, Ron, that invitation's been out there. So, I would really like,
17th, I'm sure.
really, yeah, so,
17th is planning.
planning board,
Obviously, we should get him on the 17th.
or actually even, yeah, the 19th is open, but I would agree with you. I think somebody from that board needs to come down and have a conversation just about this and a couple of other things. So that's my intention as chair, to try to facilitate that for everybody and for the town. So.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay, before we entertain the motion and get a second, is everyone clear kind of, at least as to next week?
Yes.
Is that every day?
It'll be Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, maybe Wednesday.
It's fine.
It's a lot, I know, everybody. And I know that there are gonna be some meetings, maybe you can't make it. We just need a quorum. And in the upcoming weeks, you can't miss a meeting, try to watch it, just so you're up to speed and we can continue with the business. And just remember out there, for the newer members, we have about 30+ articles that concern general government that we're gonna have to address. And maybe Amy can help us with those. The only other thing I'd like to mention is general government and libraries, like anything that you've prepared with a department head, if you wanna email me, and if there's, you want to present on it or coincide, and again, more committee members, if you think there's a certain person other than select board, DPW, police, fire, that we should most certainly bring in, please communicate that to me in email and we can have a conversation about it and I'll see if I can get those people in. I would say, one other thing, that is the Squantum Ave, Adams Street land taking. Do you remember this? The traffic light at Squantum Street and Adams, and there was a talk about eminent domain. That may be pushed also to the June meeting. So there could be a significant slate on for June, is what I'm saying. So almost like a full-on special. So there's, I don't know. So this is gonna be discussed tomorrow at the meetings, at the select board meeting, and hopefully we get some clarity.
Is there a June date for the, and is it always the first?
One was, Lori, one was shared with me as a potential. If you want to just give me a moment. I don't want to say it was the first week of June. I want to say maybe it was the second.
Right, Tom, I see the week of June 16th or the 23rd. I'm not
Yes.
sure if it's been finished since then.
It has not been finalized. So that would be the last week of school? Or the week before the last week of school? Okay. So they're scheduling. Like, so for Wednesday, if select board picks a number, do we want to meet and talk about it
On Wednesday?
on Wednesday? Even if it's just for a little while? If you want to talk about it? I mean, we're gonna start the next week and it's gonna be hot. We're gonna have all these committees in and this is our chance to ask the questions that we've been talking about tonight. So, do we think we would benefit from another discussion? It could be very brief. We don't have to stay here for 3 hours. We can stay here for an hour, 45 minutes. But just to discuss that number, Ron?
Perhaps a Zoom meeting would be easier for folks? You know, it's a lot of nights away from home.
Can we keep it to an hour? That's, you know.
Yeah, we
just
can-
meet to an hour?
Keep it to an hour. We can
8
do it
o'clock
really,
max, and that's it.
yeah, we could do it really quickly.
Okay, Wednesday, 7 to 8.
Julia has
Unless, of course, a member of the select board wants to come in and talk to us. And then that would be something that I think we should maybe make a lot more time for it. Julia?
I was just wondering, based on the conversation tonight, is having a number going to do anything for us if we still haven't had the chance to talk with the department heads and, you know, ask our questions of their individual budgets? Like, are we putting the cart before the horse, trying to discuss the number if we haven't had the opportunity to ask some of the details that, you know, we have been wondering out loud tonight?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Because we're going to
Yeah.
hear from fire and police and
Yeah, and
next week.
Yeah, I think I'd vote against a Wednesday meeting. I mean, if it's, who knows what it'll be. If it's level service, there's not a whole lot to talk about. If it's more than level service, I think I want to hear from Nick and Amy as to how that might shake out. And that's asking a lot to say, okay, Nick and Amy got 24 hours to figure out, you know, where this extra $500,000 is going to go and then come talk to us. So I would vote against a Wednesday meeting.
I want to make good use of your time because it's going to be really tight
Yeah.
the next several weeks.
I think Wednesday might be better for a general government get-together than,
Being sincere, I don't want to pull you guys in when the conversation's not going to go anywhere because I was worried about tonight, to be honest with you, about if we were going to have stuff to talk about, and we did, so I appreciate it. But anyone else want to chime in? Wednesday meeting?
Depends on how your conversation with them goes.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna have a conversation with Nick, okay? And I'll see who else I can speak to for the day after the select board meeting. And if I can get somebody here, maybe from the select board, I think we should have a meeting,
Yes, I agree.
okay? If not, we're gonna be back in here with planning board on Monday. And then go to schools, and then hopefully someone from the select board, and then police, fire, DPW. And maybe with DPW, we'll know if there's gonna be an eminent domain. If that's the case, we're gonna have to bring in other people to discuss the eminent domain taking. But at least DPW could give us maybe a little bit of foundation to what that project entails, just so we're ready for June. Does that work for everybody? I'm trying to really do this as a group. I don't want to.
Julia's hands up.
Julia?
Sorry, I thought I understood, but now so Monday, did you just say we have planning board?
Yeah, Monday's planning board. Tuesday is
Tuesday's schools.
schools. Wednesday is open. I'm trying to get speakers. And then the 20th, Thursday, is police, fire, potentially DPW.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Thanks for asking. I appreciate it. Just to reiterate it. Okay, people, everyone, look right towards your email. I'll know by tomorrow evening, tomorrow afternoon, if we're gonna have a meeting. I mean, not tomorrow, I'm sorry, what's tomorrow?
Tuesday,
I'll know tomorrow evening whether or not we should have a meeting.
or Wednesday.
Or Wednesday, first thing. It's getting someone who can talk substantively to the number. And if there's not that person, we're not gonna have a meeting.
Motion to adjourn?
Second? All in favor? Aye. Okay, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you, Warrant Committee. Thank you,